The salt-crusted wooden crate sat in the center of the room like a coffin. Around it, 6 men stood in absolute silence, their breath forming small clouds in the frigid Scottish air. Commander Alastair Denniston of Bletchley Park hadn't slept in 36 hours, but exhaustion was the furthest thing from his mind as he stared at what British destroyer HMS Bulldog had pulled from the depths of the captured German U-boat. U-110. "Open it," he whispered. The crowbar's screech against wood echoed through the converted storage facility. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, still damp with seawater, lay a machine that looked deceptively ordinary. A wooden case, about the size of a typewriter, 3 rotors visible through the open lid, a keyboard with letters that would change the course of human history. An Enigma machine, perfect, intact, betrayed by the very sailors who had died trying to protect it. But Denniston knew something the others didn't, something that made his hands tremble as he reached for the device. This wasn't just any Enigma machine. This was a Kriegsmarine model pulled directly from an active U-boat, complete with its codebooks, rotor settings, and most damning of all the daily key sheets for the entire month of June. "My God," breathed Lieutenant Commander Ian Fleming, the naval intelligence officer who would later channel these moments into spy fiction. "Do you realize what we have here?" Denniston did. But what he didn't realize, what none of them could possibly know in that frozen moment, was that their first test of the machine would reveal something so terrifying, so impossibly comprehensive, that it would shake their faith in everything they thought they knew about the war. The German military hadn't just been using Enigma to encode messages. They had been documenting everything. The call came through at 4:47 a.m. Alan Turing was hunched over his desk in Hut 8, surrounded by papers covered in mathematical notation that looked more like occult symbols than any language. His team had been working on theoretical Enigma decryption for months, building their revolutionary bomb machines to try every possible rotor combination at speeds no human could match. But it was exhausting work, tedious work, and worst of all, theoretical work. They had intercepts, thousands of them, German naval communications pulled from the airwaves by listening stations across Britain. But without knowing the daily settings, without understanding how the Germans configured their rotors each morning, every message was just random gibberish. They were fighting blind. The phone's ring cut through the silence like a scream. Turing. His voice was flat, exhausted. "Alan, it's Denniston. We have it. HMS Bulldog captured a U-boat yesterday. The crew, they didn't have time to destroy everything. We have an Enigma." A complete Enigma, and Alan. Denniston's voice dropped to something between wonder and horror. "We have the keys. All of them." The papers fell from Turing's hands. In the intelligence world, this was the equivalent of finding the enemy's brain and discovering it had been keeping a diary. Not just current operations, everything. Every message they'd sent, every order, every movement, every secret. If Turing's calculations were correct, if the machine worked as he theorized, they would be able to decrypt not just future messages, but past ones. Months of intercepted communications that had seemed like meaningless static would suddenly sing with clarity. "How soon can you be in Scotland?" Denniston asked. "I'm already packing." The machine sat on a metal table, connected to a series of recording devices Turing's team had hastily assembled. The rotors had been set according to the captured key sheet for May 8th, yesterday's settings. They had selected an intercept at random, one of thousands they'd collected but never been able to read. A transmission from U-boat command to their Atlantic Wolfpack at 14:37 hours. Turing's fingers moved across the Enigma keyboard, typing each letter of the encrypted message. J, VP, ZTLQ. The machine clicked in Word, its rotors spinning with mechanical precision. Each key press produced a new letter, illuminated on the lampboard above. A. LL. "It's working," Fleming breathed. UNITS. The room fell silent, except for the clicking. Turing typed faster. PROCED WITH OPERATION. And then came the word, that changed everything. SEALION. Operation Celion. The proposed German invasion of Britain. Someone gasped. Deniston's face went white. "Keep going," he ordered. Every word. For the next 40 minutes, they decrypted that single message. Then another and another. With each decoded transmission, the picture became clearer and more terrifying. The Germans weren't just planning. They were documenting every ship movement, every supply convoy, every tactical decision. And it was all there, encrypted in messages they'd been broadcasting openly for months, confident that Enigma was unbreakable. By hour 3, they had decoded 17 messages. By hour 6, they had decoded 112. And then, at 8:47 p.m., they decoded a message that made even Turing, a man of pure logic and mathematics, feel his blood turn to ice water. It was dated April 14th, 1941. 3 weeks earlier. It was from Admiral Karl Donitz himself, commander of the U-boat fleet, and it described, in perfect detail, the exact position of convoy HX-121, a British supply convoy that had been completely destroyed on April 16th, with the loss of 11 ships and 473 souls. The Germans had known exactly where to find them. "Check the others," Deniston said, his voice hollow. "Check all the convoy attacks from the past 2 months." They worked through the night. Message after message. Attack after attack. Convoy SC-26 destroyed March 4th. The Germans had known its position. Convoy OB-293 scattered and partially destroyed March 19th. Known. Convoy HX-114 attacked April 2nd. Known. Every single convoy attack in the Atlantic for the past 8 weeks had been preceded by an Enigma message giving the exact coordinates. But it was the final message they decoded that night, the one time-stamped May 1st at 11:23 hours, that revealed the true horror of what they'd discovered. It was an intelligence summary from German Naval Command, and it listed, in itemized detail, the sailing schedules for every major British convoy planned for the next 90 days. Information that should have been among Britain's most closely guarded secrets. Information that could only have come from one source. Someone on the British side was feeding information directly to German naval intelligence. The Enigma machine hadn't just been betraying German secrets. It had been documenting Britain's betrayal by one of her own. Alan Turing hadn't moved from his chair in 7 hours. Around him, the decoded messages lay scattered like accusations, each one a death sentence that had already been carried out. Each one proof that someone, somewhere in the British chain of command, was feeding their most vital secrets directly to the enemy. "How many people knew the convoy routes?" he asked quietly. Commander Deniston looked up from the message he'd been reading for the 5th time, as if hoping the words would somehow change. "That level of detail? 20, maybe 30 people maximum. Naval Intelligence, Admiralty Operations Staff, Convoy Routing Officers." He trailed off. The implications, choking his voice. "And we have to assume the traitor knows we've captured the Enigma," said Fleming, pacing the room like a caged predator. "U-110 didn't sink immediately. The Germans will know she was boarded. They'll know we had time to ground." No. Turing's interruption was sharp. "They can't know for certain. The U-boat sank before it could be towed to port. From aerial reconnaissance, they might assume we grabbed some equipment, but they won't know the extent." "Not yet. Not yet," Deniston repeated grimly. "Which gives us, perhaps, 48 hours. Maybe 72 if we're lucky, before the traitor learns what we have and warns Berlin to change their entire encryption system." The room fell silent. They all understood what that meant. This window, this brief golden window, was possibly the only chance they would ever have to read German naval communications. If the Enigma codes were changed, all of this would become worthless. Thousands more British sailors would die in the Atlantic, starved of the intelligence that could save them. "Then we find the bastard," Fleming said coldly. "We find him in the next 48 hours, and we do it quietly." Turing stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "We don't have to search blind. The Germans have been responding to the intelligence they receive." Those responses. He moved to the decoded messages, fingers flying across them. They're all here, in the Enigma traffic. If we can map the timeline of what the traitors sent versus when the Germans acted on it, we can narrow down who had access to that specific information at that specific time. "A temporal cross-reference," Denniston murmured, understanding dawning in his eyes. "Exactly. We build a pattern, find the intersection. How long will that take?" Turing's smile was grim. "Every minute we waste talking is a minute we don't have. Get me every convoy schedule, every operational order, every classified document that matches the intelligence in these messages. I need timestamps. I need distribution lists. I need everything. You'll have it in 2 hours. Make it 1. Captain Hugh Sinclair of Naval Intelligence was having what he would later describe as the worst morning of his career. The secure telephone call from Bletchley Park had come at dawn, scrambled through so many encryption layers that he'd barely understood it. But the message was clear enough. Trust no one. Investigate everyone. Report only to Denniston. Now he sat in his office, door locked, surrounded by personnel files. 37 people had access to Level 1 convoy intelligence. 37 potential traitors. Some he'd known for 20 years. Others were new recruits, bright young minds brought in to manage the increasing complexity of Atlantic operations. Any one of them could be the ghost. The knock on his door made him jump. "Sir? It's Lieutenant Commander Morrison. You asked to see me?" Sinclair's blood froze. Morrison. David Morrison. 28 years old. Oxford educated. Exemplary record. And according to the duty logs, he'd been on shift during 7 of the 9 instances where convoy intelligence had leaked to the Germans. "Come in." Morrison entered, impeccably dressed as always, his face showing polite concern. "Sir, I heard there was some emergency from Bletchley." "Is everything?" "Sit down, Lieutenant Commander." Something in Sinclair's tone made Morrison pause. For just a fraction of a second, his eyes flickered to the door, calculating. Then the moment passed, and he sat, crossing his legs casually. "There's been a security breach," Sinclair said carefully, watching Morrison's face. "Convoy information has been compromised. We're conducting interviews with everyone who had access." "Of course, sir. Anything I can do to help?" Morrison's voice was steady, but Sinclair noticed his hands. They were completely still. Too still. Most people fidgeted when nervous. Morrison was working to stay motionless. "Where were you on the evening of April 13th? "April 13th? Morrison frowned, appearing to think. "I believe I was home. It was a Sunday, if I recall." "You weren't on duty?" "No, sir. I had the weekend off." Sinclair consulted his notes. Morrison was lying. The duty log showed him signing in at 18 hours that Sunday. He'd had access to the routing for convoy HX-121, the convoy that was destroyed 3 days later. "And you didn't come into the office at all that day?" Morrison's eyes narrowed slightly. He knew he'd been caught. "Actually, I apologize, sir. I did come in briefly that evening, to catch up on some paperwork. It slipped my mind." "What kind of paperwork?" "Just routine filing. Nothing critical." The air between them crystallized into something sharp and dangerous. "Lieutenant Commander Morrison, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I need you to understand that how you answer will determine everything that happens next." Sinclair leaned forward. "Have you shared classified naval intelligence with anyone outside this command structure?" For a long moment, Morrison said nothing. Then, slowly, his expression changed. The polite concern melted away, replaced by something harder, colder. "Captain Sinclair, I think we both know this conversation is pointless. Whatever you think you've discovered, whatever you think you know, you're already too late. The wheels are in motion. They've been in motion for months." Sinclair felt his stomach drop. "You're admitting—" "I'm admitting nothing." Morrison stood smoothly. I'm simply observing that certain historical forces are unstoppable. Germany will win this war, Captain. That's not ideology speaking, it's mathematics. They have the superior position, the superior strategy, and now, thanks to people who understand the real shape of the future, they have the superior intelligence. You've been feeding them convoy routes. It wasn't a question. Morrison smiled. I've been helping end a pointless conflict that will only result in more British deaths. Every convoy I've helped the Germans intercept is one less convoy that will need to be sunk when Britain finally accepts the inevitable and surrenders. I've saved lives, Captain. More than you can imagine. You've murdered 473 sailors. I've spared thousands more. Morrison moved toward the door. And now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to attend to. You're not leaving this room. Morrison's hand was already on the door handle. You're going to shoot me, Captain? Here? In Admiralty House? You'd have to explain why. You'd have to reveal what you know. And the moment you do that, the Germans will change every code, every cipher, every system. Whatever you've captured, and I'm guessing from this entire charade that you've captured something significant, it will become worthless in a matter of hours. Sinclair's hand moved toward the pistol in his desk drawer. Morrison saw the movement and laughed. You won't risk it. You can't afford to. Which means I'm walking out of here. And there's nothing you can do to stop me. The game's already over, Captain. We've both just been playing our parts. I could have you arrested the moment you step outside. On what evidence? A conversation? Your suspicions? By the time you've built a case, I'll have sent word. One telephone call, Captain. That's all it takes. One call to my contact, and your precious secret becomes public knowledge. Think about it. How much is catching one traitor worth compared to winning the entire war? The terrible logic of it settled over Sinclair like ice water. Morrison opened the door. I'll see myself out. And, Captain, I'd suggest you tell Bletchley Park to work very quickly, because my contact is expecting a report from me by midnight tonight. If I don't provide one. He shrugged. Well, he'll know something is wrong, and he'll take appropriate action. The door closed softly behind him. Sinclair grabbed the phone with shaking hands. Get me Bletchley Park. Scrambled line. Now. He just let him walk out? Fleming's voice was incredulous. He had no choice, Denniston said grimly, putting down the phone. Morrison has a contact. Someone else in the network. If Morrison disappears or is arrested, the contact will warn Berlin. The Enigma codes will change immediately. Turing looked up from his calculations, his face haggard. So we have until midnight, approximately 9 hours. If Morrison doesn't report by then, his contact will know something's wrong. Can we stop him from making contact? How? We don't know who his contact is. We don't know how they communicate. If we arrest Morrison, we tip our hand. If we don't, Denniston trailed off helplessly. Fleming slammed his fist on the table. There has to be a way. Some leverage we can use. There is, Turing said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. We use the Enigma against them. We feed Morrison false information. Make him think we've captured the machine but haven't been able to break the codes. Make him believe he still has time before we become a real threat. He'll never believe it, Denniston objected. He's too smart. He'll see through it. He'll believe it because it plays into his arrogance. Morrison thinks he's won. He thinks he's untouchable. We give him evidence that confirms his worldview that British intelligence is bumbling and ineffective, that even with the Enigma in hand, we're stumbling around in the dark. And while he's feeling secure, Turing's smile was cold and sharp. We find his contact. We map every phone call he makes, every person he speaks to, every move he makes between now and midnight. Somewhere in that pattern, his contact will reveal themselves. And when they do, he let the sentence hang. Fleming nodded slowly. We take them both, simultaneously. No warning, no time to send word to Berlin. Exactly. It's risky, Denniston said. If we miss even one person in their network, then thousands of British sailors die, Turing interrupted flatly. They're going to die anyway if we don't try. This is our only move. The room fell silent. Outside, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the grounds of Bletchley Park. Somewhere in London, Lieutenant Commander Morrison was walking free, confident in his victory. Somewhere in the Atlantic, British sailors were sailing toward coordinates that had already been transmitted to German U-boat command. And somewhere in the labyrinth of British intelligence, a second traitor was waiting for Morrison's midnight report. "All right," Denniston said finally. "We have 9 hours. Let's find the ghost." What none of them knew, what they couldn't possibly know, was that they were already looking at the wrong ghost. Because Morrison had been telling the truth about one thing. The real traitor wasn't someone with access to convoy intelligence. The real traitor had access to something far more valuable. They had access to Bletchley Park itself. The realization hit Turing like a physical blow. He was staring at the duty roster, the list of everyone who had entered Hut 8 inches the past 72 hours when the pattern emerged. Someone had been here during every decryption session. Someone who shouldn't have had any reason to be present. "Fleming," he said quietly, "who authorized Patricia Kern to have access to Hut 8? Fleming looked up from the telephone logs he'd been analyzing. "Kern? The filing clerk from administration?" "She's been in this hut 17 times in the past 3 days, always during active decryption work, always staying for exactly 20 minutes. Denniston's face went pale. "Filing clerks don't have clearance for operational huts. She shouldn't be anywhere near." "She's been collecting documents," Turing interrupted. "Or that's her cover story. But there are no filing assignments that would require her to be here. I checked. Where is she now?" According to the roster, she signed out at 5:47 p.m., 30 minutes ago. Fleming was already moving. "If she's reporting to Morrison's contact, she's our connection," Turing finished. "She's been watching us decrypt the Enigma. She knows everything we've discovered." The implications crashed over them like a wave. For 3 days, while they'd been racing to unlock German secrets, someone had been standing behind them, watching, learning, recording. Every breakthrough they'd made, every convoy position they'd discovered, every piece of evidence pointing to Morrison, she'd seen it all. "We have to stop her before she makes contact," Denniston said, reaching for the phone. "No." Turing's voice was sharp. "Think. If we grab her now, whoever she reports to will know we're onto them. We have to follow her. Find the entire network." "We don't have time for that. Morrison expects to report by midnight. That's less than 6 hours. Then we move fast." Fleming grabbed his coat. "I'll follow Kern. You keep working Morrison's phone records. Someone in this chain will make a mistake." Patricia Kern climbed the stairs to her rented room with practiced calm, despite the fact that her heart was hammering against her ribs. She'd seen the way Turing had looked at the roster. She'd seen the moment understanding dawned in his eyes. They knew. She had perhaps 2 hours before they came for her. Maybe less. The room was sparse, a bed, a desk, a small wardrobe. She moved quickly to the loose floorboard beneath the window and pulled out a compact radio transmitter no bigger than a shoebox. German engineering, beautiful in its efficiency. Her hands trembled as she began encoding the message. Not an Enigma, that would be too risky now. This was older tradecraft. A simple substitution cipher that her handler had taught her 3 years ago when she'd been recruited in Berlin. Enigma captured. Stop. Bletchley decrypting all traffic stop. Morrison compromised stop codes. Must change immediately. Stop. She was halfway through transmitting when she heard the footsteps on the stairs. Heavy. Military. Multiple people. Patricia's hand moved to the transmitter's destruct switch, a small charge that would melt the device's internal components into slag. But before she could trigger it, her door exploded inward. Fleming stood in the doorway with 2 military police officers, a pistol in his hand. "Don't touch it," he said coldly. Patricia's finger hovered over the switch. "It's already done. The message is sent." Berlin knows everything. I don't think so. Fleming stepped closer. We cut the phone lines to this building 40 minutes ago. Your transmission went nowhere. The blood drained from her face. You couldn't have known We've been watching you since 6:30. You led us straight here. He gestured to the radio. Now, step away from the transmitter. Slowly, Patricia looked at the device, at Fleming's gun, at the guards blocking the door. The mathematics of the situation were clear. She'd lost. How long have you been working for them? Fleming asked as the guards moved to restrain her. She laughed bitterly. Since before the war started. I was recruited in '38 when I was studying in Munich. They promised me the world would be better under German order. Clean, efficient. No more British class systems. No more imperial exploitation. She spat the words. I believed them. And Morrison, I recruited him a year ago. He was easier than I expected. Aristocratic family fallen on hard times, resentment toward the establishment, intellectual arrogance, classic profile. She met Fleming's eyes. But you should know, we're not the only ones. The network is larger than you think. Even with us gone, the work continues. Give me names. Why would I? You've already lost. Even if my transmission didn't get through, Morrison will report by midnight. When he does, his contact will notify Berlin. The Enigma codes will change. Everything you've discovered becomes worthless. Fleming smiled grimly. About that, Morrison won't be making his midnight report. Patricia's eyes widened. What did you... Car accident. Very tragic. Happened about 20 minutes ago on the road to London. Driver lost control. Went off a bridge. No survivors. The lie hung in the air between them, perfectly crafted. Patricia's face showed the exact moment she believed it. The moment she realized her entire network had just collapsed. You murdered him, she whispered. We prevented him from committing treason. There's a difference. Fleming holstered his pistol. Now, you have one chance to avoid the same fate. Give me every name, every contact, every dead drop, everything. The list was longer than they'd feared. 12 names. Some in the Admiralty, some in Naval Intelligence, 2 in the Foreign Office. An entire network of ideological traitors who'd convinced themselves they were serving a higher purpose. We'll need to arrest them simultaneously, Denniston said, reviewing the names. If even one gets word. Already arranged, Fleming said. My 5 has teams standing by. On my signal, they move at dawn. Quiet arrests. No publicity. No trials. Turing looked up sharply. No trials? This is too sensitive. If word gets out that we captured an Enigma, let alone that we've been reading German naval traffic, the entire intelligence advantage disappears. These people will simply disappear. You mean they'll be executed? I mean they'll be removed from the equation. The specifics aren't your concern. The room fell silent. They all understood what was being said. 12 British citizens would die without trial, without record, without anyone knowing what they'd done or why. It was brutal. It was probably illegal. It was also necessary. What about the Germans? Denniston asked quietly. When Morrison doesn't report, when Kern disappears, won't they suspect? Morrison's accident will be in tomorrow's papers. As far as Berlin knows, they lost an asset to bad luck. It happens in intelligence work. They'll be cautious, certainly. But they won't know to change the Enigma codes, unless there are others. Others we haven't found. Fleming's expression was grim. That's the risk we take. But for now, we've cut off the leak. The Enigma machine is secure. And starting tomorrow morning, we begin the real work reading every German transmission, tracking every U-boat, saving every convoy we can. Turing stood and walked to the window, looking out over the darkened grounds of Bletchley Park. Somewhere in the Atlantic, British sailors were sailing through waters prowled by German submarines. They didn't know that the balance had just shifted. They didn't know that the machine humming quietly in Hut 8 was about to become the most powerful weapon in the war. But they would. In the weeks and months to come, they would see it in the convoys that survived, in the U-boats that never found their targets, in the slow, grinding turn of the tide. "It's not over," Turing said softly. "The Enigma has already betrayed so much. So many deaths. So many secrets. Even with the traitors removed, we're going to read things we wish we hadn't. Learn things that will haunt us." "That's the price of intelligence," Denniston replied. "We see the world as it really is. No illusions, no comfort. And we can never tell anyone," Fleming added. "That's the hardest part. When the war is over and Britain celebrates victory, we'll know exactly how much it cost. How many died before we captured this machine? How many more might have lived if we'd moved faster? But we can never speak of it." Turing turned back to face them. "Then we'd better make it count. Every decryption, every intercept, every life we save from here forward, it has to justify what's already been lost." Outside, the midnight hour approached. In London, MI, 5 teams were preparing for dawn raids. In the Atlantic, U-boats prowled in patterns that would soon be obsolete. And in Hut 8, the captured Enigma machine sat waiting to reveal more secrets. The betrayal had been stopped, but the real work was only beginning. The streets erupted in celebration. Church bells rang across Britain. People danced, kissed strangers, wept with relief. After 6 years of darkness and death, the war in Europe was finally over. Alan Turing stood alone in his office at Bletchley Park, listening to the distant sounds of celebration. On his desk lay a folder marked Ultra, Destroy After Reading. Inside were statistics that would never see the light of day. Thanks to Enigma decryption, the Allies had shortened the war by an estimated 2 to 3 years, potentially 2 million lives saved, hundreds of convoys protected. Dozens of U-boats sunk before they could attack. The entire Battle of the Atlantic turned on the axis of that captured machine. But the folder also contained another number, one that made Turing's hand shake when he read it. Before they'd captured the Enigma, during those months when the traitors were feeding convoy positions to the Germans, over 2,000 British sailors had died in attacks that could have been prevented if they'd known about Morrison and Kern sooner. 2,000 souls, the price of their ignorance. He thought about the 12 traitors who'd been quietly executed in May 1941. No trials, no records. Their families told they'd died in bombing raids or accidents. Even that had been a lie, built on lies. The telephone rang. It was Commander Denniston, calling from London. "Alan, there's a ceremony next week. Churchill wants to honor the Bletchley Park team. Discreetly, of course. The work remains classified. But he wants to acknowledge." "No," Turing said quietly. "No? Tell the Prime Minister thank you. But no. What we did here, it wasn't heroic. We just solved puzzles while other people died. And we'll never be able to tell anyone the full truth. So, what's the point of a secret ceremony for secret work?" Denniston was silent for a long moment. "The point is that you saved millions of lives." "After we let thousands die because we didn't see the traitors standing right behind us." Turing closed the folder. "Every message we decrypted, Commander, Morrison, and Kern saw it too. For 3 days, we thought we were reading German secrets. We never realized the Germans were reading ours. That wasn't your fault, wasn't it? I built the mathematical framework. I designed the decryption protocols. And I never once considered that someone might be watching over my shoulder." He laughed bitterly. The Enigma didn't just betray German secrets. It betrayed our arrogance, our certainty that we were the clever ones. Outside, the celebrations grew louder. Victory, triumph, joy. Inside Hut 8, Turing began feeding documents into the furnace. The official order came down from Churchill himself. Everything related to Enigma was to be classified for 50 years. The machines were to be destroyed, the documents burned, the personnel sworn to secrecy under penalty of imprisonment. Fleming drafted the final summary report, a document that would be locked in a vault until 1995. The capture of U-110 and its Enigma machine represents the single most valuable intelligence coup of the war, he wrote. However, this success must be measured against the preceding intelligence failure that allowed enemy agents to operate within British command for months. The lesson is clear. Our greatest vulnerability is not German encryption, but human weakness, ideology, arrogance, the belief that we cannot be betrayed by our own. He paused, considering his next words carefully. In the end, the Enigma machine taught us that every secret cuts both ways. While we were learning to read German communications, we discovered they had been reading ours. The machine we captured had been documenting not just German operations, but the ongoing betrayal of British intelligence by 12 of our own people. Perhaps the most disturbing revelation is how long this betrayal went unnoticed. How many died because we trusted the wrong people with our most vital secrets? Fleming sealed the report and marked it Top Secret, Eyes Only, classified until 1995. 50 years of silence. Half a century before anyone would know the full truth. Alan Turing died alone in his home in Wilmslow, Cheshire. The official verdict was suicide by cyanide poisoning. He was 41 years old. The newspapers reported that he was a mathematician. They mentioned something vague about war work. None of them knew that this man had helped win the war. None of them knew about the Enigma. None of them knew about Morrison, Kern, or the price of that 3-day window when traitors watched over Britain's greatest secret. Ian Fleming attended the small funeral. So did a handful of people from Bletchley Park, all of them bound by the same oath of silence. They couldn't eulogize him properly, couldn't tell the world what he'd accomplished, couldn't explain why this quiet, awkward genius deserved monuments. All they could do was remember and keep the secret. After the funeral, Fleming stood in the rain, thinking about that captured Enigma machine, about Morrison's cold arrogance, about Kern's radio transmitter, about the 12 traitors who died in the dark so that millions could live in the light. The Enigma had betrayed everything it touched. German secrets, British security, human trust. And in the end, even the man who'd unlocked its mysteries couldn't escape its shadow. Fleming would later channel these memories into fiction, into stories of spies and secrets, of betrayals and impossible choices. But he could never tell the real story, not for decades, not until long after everyone involved was dead or scattered. That was the final betrayal of the Enigma. The truth itself had to remain encrypted. The last of the Enigma machines still in British possession was finally destroyed in a classified facility in Buckinghamshire, 33 years after its capture. 33 years of secrets. The few remaining Bletchley Park veterans who knew the full story about the machine, about the traitors, about those 3 terrible days in May 1941 were now elderly. Some had died. Others had learned to live with the silence. The world still didn't know what they'd done. Still didn't know about Morrison and Kern. Still didn't know that for 3 days, Britain's greatest intelligence triumph had been observed and recorded by enemy agents standing right behind them. And perhaps, they thought, that was better, because the truth about the Enigma wasn't just a story of brilliant code-breaking and heroic intelligence work. It was also a story about betrayal, about execution without trial, about the 2,000 sailors who died while traitors walked free among them. It was a story about how victory has a price, and someone always has to pay it in silence. The captured Enigma machine had revealed everything. German plans, British traitors, human weakness, the true cost of war. It had betrayed more secrets than anyone imagined possible. But its final secret, the complete truth about what happened in May 1941, would remain locked away for another 20 years. Some secrets, they decided, were meant to stay buried, even the ones that could make you weep.